Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Galit Speaks podcast. I am here with another great guest, Amanda Fludd. So happy to have her on. She is a licensed psychotherapist with a private practice in New York, a corporate mental health consultant, and a mindset coach to minority women in business. She has over 15 years of experience as a therapist and coach, taking those skills from the couch to support professional women in shifting past fear, perfectionism, and all the emotional noise that they experience that puts limits on their goals. She is passionate about women building their emotional toolbox and embracing the importance of mental health in their everyday lives. Her background in mental health gives her an edge as a coach as she infuses the psychology of how we think and the power of mindfulness to inspire women to calm their inner critic, trust their abilities, and live fiercely as they challenge their potential. She's a wife, mom, and an avid runner, even though she dislikes it, with 4 half marathons under her belt this year alone. She keeps moving to keep the weight off her hips, Kit Kats in her hands, and to stay connected to the opportunities running brings. Hey Amanda, that's all so amazing.
I listen to it. I'm like, oh, that's me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
yeah, I totally get that feeling where like sometimes I listen to my bio and I'm like, oh yeah, I did all of that.
Right,
Yeah, and I'm proud.
right, right. Like, man, she sounds good. Like, oh wait, that's me.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah, okay. So I kind of want to dive right into what you do and why you do what you do.
Ooh, juicy. Oh my goodness. So, wow, it's like, where do you start? Essentially, for me, like, I just love all things mental health. I think it's so important. And I think there's a lot of stigma, a little something about mental health when we think about it. Like, it's people with all these crazy problems. But, mental health is just important as your physical health. And it plays into everything that we do, right? So,
Yeah.
from the day to day anxieties, from just basic things to running your business to how you show up at work to leading your teams. So I like this idea of not just seeing people on the couch and helping you when you recognize the house is on fire, but I want to get to you beforehand and help you navigate other spaces too. And it's been particularly important for me because just kind of working in the field, you come across a lot of minorities who really just haven't had access to services and support. And they end up at the end of their road. And I just really didn't like that working in institutions. And for me, it was like, okay, we've got to get into the community and bring as much skill and support as we can. And that's how I got into private practice, which just grew in terms of, okay, no, it just can't be here on the couch. Like, again, we've got to meet people where they are and get to people who are trying to do some fabulous things and just building their business.
Yeah. And so your private practice is in New York. Where in New York? Because I know we have a lot of listeners in New York.
New York is in the house. So I'm in Long Island, but I border Queens. So we actually get a lot of
Okay.
people from like New York City as well, at like the Lynbrook and Valley Stream area. But the office itself is in Lynbrook in Long Island. So if you're
Okay.
around, say hello.
Cool. So that's like kind of perfect. I now I live in Arizona, but I'm originally from New York.
Oh, okay.
And I lived in Far Rockaway and then most recently Rockaway Beach.
I know
Which,
that life. I've been to that beach. It's not like the Caribbean, but it's a nice beach.
yeah, exactly. It is I feel like it's the closest thing to living outside of New York City, inside of New York
Yeah,
City.
yeah, definitely. You could definitely like put on the blinders and just be like, yes, I'm on vacation.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say on vacation.
Right. This feels good. Yeah.
But yeah, it feels great. Especially the boardwalk. I don't know if you've been there in the last couple of
Yeah.
years. The boardwalk has really taken
Oh
off.
yeah, they developed a lot.
Yeah, and now like the Rockaway Hotel is awesome, and they have like lots of
I
great
didn't even know about that. You're in Arizona, no more than me. I didn't realize there was a Rockaway Hotel.
Oh yeah, I just moved here like 2 years ago, and I just closed down my office there in August. So
Wow.
like I was still flying back and
Back and
forth up
forth.
until,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, because I still own my condo in Rockaway Beach. So I'll be back there at some point. Right now, I just really like how Arizona feels.
Mhm. I love
Yeah.
that. And I love that you're going with what feels good to you, right? I think a lot of times we don't do that. We put everything else first. But, I
Right.
like the idea of trying to pursue what does feel good to you.
Yeah. So when people come to you, is it normally that they find you as first the therapist and then you kind of migrate into the coaching? Or do people find you as a coach?
Yeah, it's weird, but I mean, they kind of find me on both ends, right? Sometimes I feel like I have like this double life. Sometimes like my therapist life, and then I market separately too as a coach. But I do have a few people that kind of they trickle over there, right? Where it's like they're really done with the hard work of therapy, and it really is more like this coaching, guiding, supporting feel. And then some of those folks will transition over into the coaching side, especially if they have like business ideas that they're working on and things like that. So definitely both sides. I feel like the therapy side is probably trumping if I had to put one over the other, but it makes sense because we're just like in this crazy space with mental health right now. There's so much going on, coming out this
Yeah.
pandemic, trying to just get through life. And everybody really recognizes that their mental health needs a little tune up. So it's
Oh
busy.
yeah. I know. I'm like, do you work across state lines? Because my therapist in New York did not. And I
It's
have been,
crazy. There's so
yeah,
many limits. It's really bad. And I think that's why coaching works and that's one of the reasons why I shifted too, because it opens up more doors because just because of our license, we're limited to the state that we're licensed in.
yeah,
But coaching doesn't have those sorts of restrictions. So it gives you a little bit more like fluidity, but there's still some restrictions on the other side on how much we could do. But um, it's crazy. You'll just be in New York and that's it. So like if I
yeah.
have clients that move out of state similar, it's like, oh no, sorry.
I
So
know. I remember when I was first moving, so I only planned on moving for 6 months
mm,
and then coming back to New York. So
mhm.
my therapist at the time tried to get some kind of like waiver to be able to still see me, and they like denied her. And I was like, you're just like in the middle of this was 2 years ago in like the height of the pandemic. I'm
Mm,
like, you're just letting people go from their
right.
therapy
Hey,
like
good
in the
luck.
middle of a pandemic. Just like,
Right, right, right. And that tells you what a priority mental health is, right? Like not so much, until something like really extreme happens. Otherwise, it's like, no, you'll be all right. Let
yeah.
her go to Arizona. She can catch you later.
Yeah. So I'm gonna start. I want to start talking about like women in business and people of color in business and especially females of color in business
Yeah.
because so I have had a weird kind of road. My name is Galit Sadiq. I am a person of color, but I am white passing. And
Hmm.
so I've had a very weird journey where when I was applying to things and looking for work, I knew that I was being passed over because they just couldn't read my name on a
Damn.
resume.
Isn't that
You know, and
crazy?
I got that
Mhm.
feeling when like other people were getting like callbacks or something and I always knew when I'm walking in, they don't know who they're about to see.
Right, because they've already got like a preconceived like image, right? So
Yeah,
I'm sure a couple mouths have dropped open, like, oh,
yeah,
hey,
exactly. Because I'm the name that well before I had TSA pre-check, I was the name that got searched
you,
randomly every single time I flew.
you were
And
getting
it
that
was
random number every time. Mhm,
like,
mhm.
oh, so random, so random.
Ma'am, step to the side. Thank you.
But so what, there were some challenges and I'm very clear there were a lot of privileges that I
Right.
had, you know,
Yeah.
going in and starting my business. What do
Hmm.
you think are some of the biggest challenges that women of color face?
You know, I think a big thing is community. And I almost think too, like some of it is sort of like within ourselves. But first, like starting with community around this idea of business and having our own and entrepreneurship. I think those are things that we haven't necessarily seen in our and like in our upbringing and in our lives as much. Like I think entrepreneurship is really like taken off. Like when I went to high school, it was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like this one thing. Now kids are like YouTube stars at like 9, right? And like selling sneakers out their car. Like it's so many options now that we didn't have. So there's a like a generation of us that really kind of grew up with that, and we just didn't have role models for that. So I think that's a challenge in itself to want to be something that you don't necessarily see in your community. You really just see like hard work, that single job, like working all the way to that pension life, and feeling like this thing is far from me, right? Like typical like white corporate America, and like that represents business, but having my own as an entrepreneur doesn't necessarily represent business. So not seeing it, having something to really look at, and that guidance in the community around that, I think that's definitely been a challenge, and it's something that I've seen for other women as well, and other women of color when we talk about it. Um, because I think it's outside, we can't really see ourselves there. And then within our community, then people don't know how to talk to you and sometimes even take you seriously, right? They're like, you want to leave your job and do what? Like, no, 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 no. Stay in your safe job. Now you need a pension. Like, why are you leaving that? Right? And they don't know how to like speak life and encouragement into what you're doing because it seems like such a risk, right? And they would rather you be safe, which makes sense, but it doesn't really help you. So it's hard to maneuver that when you don't have that support and
Yeah.
place to go.
Yeah, so it's crazy because that was definitely one of the biggest things that I faced. Um, you know, I grew up in a community where my dad was an ultra Orthodox rabbi, and like for me, women were housemakers,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, like, and were basically just popping out babies and didn't
Mm-hmm.
have careers. Like that was
Right,
the ideal woman,
right.
right? And I did not fit that mold at
Oh,
all.
you were like the black sheep. Like what?
Oh, 100%. Like now I mean, I got tattoos, I got piercings, my hair is
Woo!
blue, I got my own business, you know, like I
I
fully
might go to
embrace.
that movie. Like we don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk.
Yeah, I have fully embraced it, and the
Uh,
family that embraces me, I fully embrace. But it was definitely something that I struggled with, constantly having to fight that image and get people to take me seriously because even now I when I started my business I had way more of a baby face, but even now I have a little bit of a baby face, and like
mhm.
going out there and trying to, you know, assert myself
Oh
in a
yeah,
business setting
yeah,
was daunting.
yeah. And I would say I feel like that is there in general for women, where they're already kind of seen like less than, right? We're already in the back,
Mhm.
and then now you have women of color on top of that, right? Or even even further behind. And so I think we all face collectively this idea of being taken seriously. Like, what's a woman doing in that role? Furthermore, if you don't look the part per se for whatever reason, right? If you was just happen to have a younger face, right? I'm gonna happen to have a different name, right? But these are things that it holds us back actually, but then emotionally, because then we start really doubting like who we are and if we're really capable, if we really belong here. And I think that's the part that gets really tricky too. I think a lot of people just kind of give up because they don't have that support, and then they start second guessing if they're good enough to like be in the space.
Yeah, I think the most critical things for me
Mhm.
when you know, when I got comfortable in my business was when I built that support system. And I did it through two ways.
Mhm.
One was I had a network in Rockaway Beach. We started a nonprofit called Ladies of Business, Rockaway Beach. It
Mm.
has evolved a little bit now, but to be a little more inclusive. So it's Rockaway Creates now, but we we started a nonprofit, and it was basically what we started as was just like a support system where
Mm.
everybody was welcome to the meetings. You come in, you sit, you talk, you ask for things that you need, and you offer things that you have, you know?
That
And
sounds so simple, but it's like it's so non-existent that you have to create that, right?
exactly. Exactly. And then the other thing was I got this amazing opportunity to, I graduated from the 10,000 small businesses, it's the Goldman Sachs. And at that time it was Goldman Sachs and Tory Burch's combined program for 10,000 small businesses.
Mm.
And it was an all female cohort and just gave me like this beautiful support system
Yeah.
that of just these female entrepreneurs that were really like on point getting shit done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so difficult because people don't understand when you're in a business, when you start your business, you are alone. You
Mm-hmm.
are so alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
there is no one besides another business owner that can truly understand
Mm.
pressures
What's
that
required?
that entails. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. And can understand what goes into it because it's hard to tell a regular person. Like, yeah, I had to stay up till like 1, 2 o'clock to like get my Instagram together and upload this thing for my launch. Right? It's like what? Right? So it's like a whole nother language and sacrifice that I think it is easier to get it when you're in it, right? And similar to you coming up into this from when I got into private practice, because I started under someone else thinking like, okay, I could learn the ropes, and I was very clear, and I was like, this is what I want to do, and I hopefully just wanted to be here for a year. I was under a gentleman, and you know he's like, yeah, I'll teach you, but that never happened. He was in his own interests, and I had to still learn on my own. I was determined to do that and figure it out. And from that, it just grew into something else. So for me, it was not, again, not having that community. And I didn't want that for other women either. So eventually, like I created my own community as well, the Mindset and Motivation community for women entrepreneurs of color. And we exist on Facebook and we've done some things offline. But for me, it was a space where I want you to know that you can be encouraged, like people have your back, like we're going to pour into you with skills and like help create that vision that you may not see, but something is in you and you want to give more and you want it to be more, but maybe you just need some help putting the pieces together because you shouldn't have to work this hard to figure it out.
Yeah, I feel like there's such an idea of gatekeeping around the resources needed to build a business.
People do that. Can you tell me? Because I don't understand. And it's not just a male female thing. Because unfortunately, I've experienced it in my field, in the therapy side, mental health side, where it's like people are like, "No, I can't tell you that." Like you feel like you're begging for information. Like there's enough clients to go around. You can't see everybody. What's it going to hurt you to give me some information and support me? And I think it's a real complex issue in terms of going back to community and how we support each other and learning how to do that. And this idea of feeling threatened. So I think we feel threatened and we like pull back. But what can I really take from you? Because you can't do everything. So it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and it's kind of like this fear-based scarcity mentality where you're just like, oh, if I give this person the information to build their business, that's somehow going to affect me. But like I've had it happen to me when I've been in a totally separate field. Like, and I never wanted that. I've always thought, like that's the reason I created this podcast. Like I always wanted information to be available to whoever needs it because
Right.
that is a resource that should be shared, you
I
know?
absolutely agree with you. And we've got to challenge that, I think. Like, why do we feel this need to protect so much or to feel like threatened or intimidated by people? Because there's definitely stuff going on there. And like, it only hurts you in the long run because then it's like these are people that might support you at the end of the day. You might have to come back around and ask them for help when they're doing all fabulous, right? Like, oh, can I do it? No, because you didn't want to share with me. I'm not going to share with you now. No,
Yeah.
you just never know. So it just doesn't make sense. But we've got to figure that out. Doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah. And I feel like another topic that I wanted to talk to you about is trauma and how
Mhm.
that shows up in our business, because I feel like that could be a trauma response, right?
Absolutely, right? If maybe you grew up in that space of like, I've had to protect everything, or I'm used to things being like taken from me, or I can't trust people, right? Because trauma is essentially this loss of control. So somebody at some point took that away from you. So now there's like this hyper protection, and we don't always realize it because like we separate our emotional selves from the rest of the world, but you can't do that, right? The patterns and how you learn to respond will play out no matter what the scenario is in front of you. If it's from playing a sport to like engaging with your family to even engaging with your business, if I feel everybody's coming for me, I'm going to respond the same way, right? I'm not going to be open and engaging and trusting. I'm going to be, withdrawing and second guessing and being like extra cautious, right? Or I may not ask for help, right? If we grew up in homes where we didn't have help or we didn't even know how to ask, we might do the same thing in our business. And I think, as you know, like we can't do this thing without help and without
Yeah.
asking and being able to open up. And there is a vulnerability, and you can, tell me if you agree, to having a business, right? And in terms of when it ain't working, everybody
Oh
like
yeah.
a pretty picture, but there's days, there's hard days, there's days when you have no idea what you're doing, and you have to be open enough to know, like, I need help, and to be able to explain that to people. That can feel really yucky. If you grew up in spaces where people only wanted to know you were shining and doing well and achieving, and like failing was not an option, all of that's going to play out into your business, and that might crush your business more than anything else.
Yeah, I know that I definitely have that. And the beginning of my business was really tough because I did not know how to ask for help. And I
Right.
literally did everything myself
Mm-hmm.
at to the point where like my first website was built by me trying to write my own code. Like
Oh, that's deep.
like I this like I started back in 2015 and my first website, it's still live and I refuse to give it to people because I'm just like, I don't want, like, I had another website professionally made and I just had it separate because I have two like sides to my business.
Right.
So like one is the original one that I created that I never show people. And then I have like the good website that I send everybody to.
Yeah.
But like I could not ask for help in the beginning and I had to learn how to, because that was just something like, no, you do it on your own. You pick yourself up by your own bootstraps and blah 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 blah. But like,
Oh my gosh. And those are the things. Those are the things that we're responding to. That's said. It's maybe been said in passing. It's been said over and over and over, but you don't even realize you're responding to it.
yeah. And it took me so long to get out of that mentality. It was probably the first like maybe 2.5 years of my business until I was really like open enough to like start asking for help and getting people to, involved and just like
Mm-hmm.
delegating. And that's such, when you can't do that, you can't grow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it just hurts, right? And it's like you got to ask yourself, like, why am I positioning myself to really kind of suffer, especially if like this is something that I love and something that I want to do, right? And
Yeah.
that suffering part could definitely be related to just some of that trauma, or even if you don't want to look at it as trauma, because sometimes I don't think people even realize their experience has been traumatic or could be considered a trauma. But if it's in response to things that feel familiar from your upbringing, like you said, the bootstrapping thing, like those messages around that we figure it out, that we don't ask for help. If you've heard those things or you said those things to yourself, that's still like a form of trauma, or at least a form of hurt that you're responding to. And we've got to figure out how to undo that, right? How to show up with
Mhm.
courage. I think you've got to really evaluate the life that you want And if it isn't really moving in a way that makes you feel good and happy, then it's like, okay, I've got to figure out what's going on. And I've got to figure out what do I have to do. Maybe I've got to, flex my little courage muscle and do some things different than what I know so that my business could be successful. But most importantly, like the person behind it could be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. And we actually have some questions from a Facebook user who saying, I don't know the proper way to ask for help.
Mm.
And the right help seems so out of reach. What do you have to say to somebody who feels like that?
Mm-hmm. I would say I want you to just play around with it, right? It's like if I didn't know how to make like spaghetti and meatballs, right? I would just start putting some stuff on the stove, throw some water, and I would see what happens. So I may not know, but let me try. And maybe I can practice. Maybe I can practice with people close to me. Maybe I can practice with a perfect stranger just to see what happens. Like, hey, and maybe something like not so like emotionally charged. Like if they say no, it's going to really hurt your feelings. But like, hey, can I borrow sugar? Can I borrow a piece of paper, something like that, and see how that feels. And when you realize like, oh, that's okay, it may be easier to keep going because it's really the fear of what's going to happen that holds us back from trying. But that's actually like the antidote to this thing, because the more you try it, the more you get to teach yourself that like, oh, it's okay, and people actually want to help. And I'll even say like, I've gotten so many yeses from people to do things for me, and absolute strangers, whether it's like coming into our community to do things or like presenting or doing things like this where, we like co-host and things like that. Simply by saying, hey, I love what you do. Would you mind coming to talk to my community about this? And they say yes. So you'd be surprised how willing people are, even though there's some people that's not, because they have their own stuff to work to. But there's a lot of yeses out there.
Yeah, I think it's you're right. It's starting with like little things, right? And just like building that muscle
Mm-hmm.
and then going, forward and asking for something that's maybe a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And I have to say, like me myself, I struggle with like the really big stuff still, but I know that I have to.
Mm. I'm glad that you said that, because I feel like we feel as though we're going to get to this point where it'll be perfect all the time. Because I could absolutely relate to that, where there's moments where like I'm scared to do things too, right? And like I'm scared to go after the things. And honestly, for me, it's more the things that I know if I do it, it's probably going to bring up like a different level of success for me. So I think whenever that's in front of me, I just notice my own like resistance with that. But I say that to say you can know as much as you know and have had the experience, and it doesn't mean you're not going to be afraid and that feeling won't come back up. But the beauty of like practicing and remembering to give yourself grace is that you leave space for that to happen and not beat yourself up over it. And to then make decisions that'll keep you moving forward and get you to where you want to go.
Yeah, so I have a question. If let's say you get to that place and out of fear, you do not ask for help in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get yourself out of that once you're in kind of this spiral?
And that funk.
Yeah.
Deep diving. Biggest thing is awareness, and that's like where mindfulness comes in. So like once you're aware that you're going into that death spiral, notice that. And then literally it's like seeing a stop sign. If it wasn't so far from me, I would grab it. I have a stop sign pillow in my office and I keep it there for particular clients that love the spiral. It's like, look at that, right? So, like visualize that big old red stop sign and recognize what you're doing and what's happening, and then decide to do some things. But before you figure out what to do, ask yourself what you need. Right? Why am I spiraling right now? How do I feel about that? Maybe I need to like take care of the emotions behind that. Like I'm disappointed that I didn't do anything. I feel really bad about that. Okay. What do I need to do to help myself feel a little bit better? Right. Or if it's the thoughts, I'm thinking like, why didn't you do that? You know that you're supposed to. Okay. What do I need to say to myself instead so that I don't feel bad? Right. That I'm not like punishing myself and being like my own little mean girl. What can you say to yourself instead? And I would even push you to apologize to yourself, right? Because maybe in that moment you were more critical than you needed to be, maybe critical like somebody from in your past life,
Yeah.
aka that's your trauma talking. But maybe instead, like, hey self, or hey Amanda, I'm really sorry that I spoke that way to you, and I get it, you were a little bit afraid to do X, Y, and Z, but maybe next time you will. Maybe next time, instead of walking away, we could stay in the room. Maybe next time we'll bring a friend with us and help you get through it. But it's okay, right? So apologize to you. I think that's okay, and then think about what maybe I can do better next time.
Yeah. That's great advice.
Hmm.
I love that. And let me ask you, because there are so many people that are walking around with like undiagnosed trauma, unidentified traumas, where do they start?
Mm. I'll just bring it back to awareness. We're so busy, really busy avoiding. I think anybody and everybody could start with just slowing down and spending a little bit of time with yourself, almost in quiet, even though it's gonna feel uncomfortable. That's okay. But in those moments, again, just ask yourself, like, what do I need right now? Like, what's coming up for me? Why is that? And almost just being really, really curious. And you could even just keep asking yourself why and see what comes up, right? Why do I feel so nervous? Where did that come from? When did that really happen? When did I first feel nervous? Right. And maybe some things will start connecting for you. And if it's something that just doesn't make you feel good, it may be a place that is worth addressing. I think in terms of this difference between like coaching and therapy, I think if something is super disruptive to your life, where like it's hard for me to go to work, it's hard for me to keep a job, it's hard for me to like maintain relationships, I'm overthinking constantly, and that I like really can't get things done, I think that's where you really want to start with therapy, so someone could do like that deep dive work with you and help you like navigate that space, because we want you to get through your day to day. But if it's like it just comes up from time to time in certain situations, it's hard for me to like speak, it's hard for me to get up on socials, that those are places you can be like coached through, right? So just to share that kind of distinction of like, who do I need to work with? There's some great coaches that can do some great things and definitely ask questions. But when that emotion is really disrupting you and your progress in life or business, then you might want to start with some therapy, honey. And let's do some real like digging and clearing out. It's like clearing out the garage. All right, coaching might get you to the front, but therapy we might have to like really get to everything and organize and pack it away nicely.
Yeah. And it's important to note that you can need both, right? You
Oh
can
yeah,
need like therapy on a personal level and
yeah.
like be killing it in business, but still have those things come up where you need a coach, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, and there's so many like little things you need to be coached on, right? Like social media, right? Or what, speaking and all these things, because it's skills, and a lot of us, by no fault of our own, like we didn't grow up with all the skills in the world to do all the things. So you need somebody that can teach you, and I think that's where coaching is a great avenue for that.
Yeah. And do you find that most of the people that come to you are women of color?
Yeah, those are my people. But sometimes I get people outside of that, which is cool too. I think it's like how we tell people to like niche down and not be afraid of that, because even within your niche, you're still going to get people outside of that want to work with you anyway for X, Y, and Z reasons, right? I've had non people of color come and work with me because I am a woman of color, right? So, I'm open to that once it's something that I feel like we could work on together. But by majority, it's women of color because of that relatedness. Because you don't have to explain the experiences, and like we can connect on the little things. We know the nuances, so it's all these subtle things that make it easier for us to like just get down to business instead of having to explain like why I do that or why it's not, or like holding back. Again, there's some vulnerability that's required both in therapy and in business. And if you don't feel comfortable with the person that you're working with, it's just not gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I mean, I have always been the type where like I'll try out a ton of therapists until I feel comfortable. and then I'll stick with them forever, you know?
Right.
But, you know, that's just how it is. Like, you have to feel like you can be real with this
Yeah.
person, because if it not, then it doesn't work.
It's not gonna work. It's like going to the mechanic. If you don't tell them all the noises and what's happening, like how are they gonna know what to get to, right? Then you drive out the car still making the same damn noise, right? You can't be mad at the mechanic, like you didn't explain everything that's happening. So if you're in a working relationship with somebody or any relationship, even a personal one, and you're not able to communicate like your needs and what's going on and what's happening, there's so much that's gonna be missed, and then we'll just be having the same issue.
Yeah.
So
I feel like it sometimes in therapy and also just in general with doctors, people recognize that they are also they have the ability to choose,
mm-hmm.
and they have the ability to like determine like, hey, I'm going to this person, but I don't have to stick with them if it doesn't feel right.
Feel good. Yeah. I mean, I tell people that, right? If to give it a try, I think from the beginning you kind of know anyway, but if you're not sure, to stick with it at least for like a month or so, because you just have a sense, right? So, and if you feel those like walls coming down, then that's a good space for you, right? And not just that you kind of feel good, but like you're doing work. Um, I see therapy as work. I see coaching as work. Like it's not just to come and chit chat and sip tea, right? Like you should be getting something out of it. You should be doing some work that's gonna like generate change, right? Because then otherwise you're just gonna be in the same place again.
So, oh, this is a great one. And I don't know if you can answer this, but how do you know when you found that person
The
that
one,
it's going to work with, even like on the coaching level and on the therapist level?
mm, outside of it just feeling really good, I think you're getting like your questions answered, right? Like you're feeling supported. You're feeling like the things that you really wanted to know and why you came in the first place is being addressed. And you feel like you're like the only one in the room and they're really about you. I think that combination of inner knowing and recognizing that this person is really here for you and responding in a way that you don't walk out of there like, why did I come here? Right. Or like, why did I pay for this? Or, or, oh, wow, like they really got me today. Like, okay, I could walk out and tell you like 2 or 3 things that I learned today. I usually always ask people, like, what are your takeaways from today? Um, so that they're really aware, but also so that I know that you're getting what, we're working on, and that they can understand like what they're getting to
Yeah.
articulate that. Because if they can't, then it isn't working. Something is off. It shouldn't just walk out feeling good. Like, what else did you get from that
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah. I love that. Because I know it's kind of like a delicate dance. I'm a financial wellness coach myself. So
Mhm.
sometimes there's like this delicate dance of making someone a little uncomfortable to make sure that like they start to change,
Mhm.
but also making them feel supported enough that they've got the the foundation to like
Mm.
make that change.
Right, to handle that. Right. And I agree with that. So they're giving you the skills to do that, but they are willing to make you a little bit uncomfortable too, because you got to be uncomfortable to grow, right? And again, flipping it into anything else. If you were at the gym and you want to lose X amount of pounds or just like lift more or whatever, there's going to be a point where it just hurts, right? And
Yeah.
it's super uncomfortable. But after a while, you're not going to be in that space anymore, right? You're gonna know what you gotta do. Somebody's gonna tell you how many sets and reps or how to hold the thing or do the thing, so you get there. And I think in that coaching or therapeutic relationship, it's the same thing. We are holding that delicate balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when people first come to you, another thing that like I want to talk to you about, you mentioned courage
Mm,
when we were like getting ready for this.
mm-hmm.
So what does that mean to you, and how does that feel?
Ooh, child, like that is big because I think a lot of us are really talking ourselves out of like our purpose and our greatness, right? And I think courage is something that we need a little bit more of. And sometimes we're so comfortable that we forget how to be courageous, and we forget how to take um, a little bit of risk. But courage is being uncomfortable and still moving towards like that place of like risking and taking a chance. Yeah, so I'm trying to think how to make this make sense for you guys, right? If you think about, the life that you want, and whether that's just life or just like in terms of business what you want, start to think about like, what's the impact that you want to have, right? And is what I'm doing now taking me from that, or is it moving me closer to that? Right? Because if it's taking me from it, then you're probably not in a place of courage. You're probably in a place of like comfort and maybe fear, right?
Mm.
But if you're like, okay, that's not where I want to be, and this doesn't feel good, as you move forward, like that's courage, right? If you're in that place, like, man, I'm comfortable. Why? Ask yourself, like, why haven't I stepped out? Like, what's getting in my way? And whatever that is, what do I need to do? Because then that's going to be courage. So it's definitely something you can do. It's almost like a verb, it's an action word, right? It's things that can happen. And maybe just ask yourself, like, okay, now that I know I'm in this place that I'm really uncomfortable with, because I do want to grow my business, I do want to see change in my life, I don't want to repeat whatever my history and family legacy has been. What is that one small courageous step that I can take towards the direction that I want?
Yeah. And we had a Facebook user say, it's the courage to continue that counts, and that they really like this quote. How do you feel about that?
It's the courage to continue that counts. I agree. The courage to continue, because that means that you've given yourself, like we talked about, that space too, right? That knowing that sometimes I am going to mess up, sometimes it is going to be hard, sometimes I will be afraid, but that thing inside me that wants this so bad is going to continue. And right, that is what courage is. So courage isn't like it's going to happen all the time. I think it's like knowing that sometimes I'm gonna mess up. I'm not gonna feel my greatest. I'm not gonna want to do this. I'm gonna procrastinate. I'm gonna put stuff off. But like I want to keep going. Like for me in my vocabulary, like quitting is like nowhere in my vocabulary. I'm not really sure why. But even on the toughest of things, even if I need to like regroup, even if things didn't go well, like that's just not a thing for me. It's like, how do I figure this out? And I think it's because that thing that I want is so big and so important to me that I'm willing to figure that out, even when things are kind of like, ooh, which happened.
Yeah, I kind of feel like for me, it's been I don't quit, I pivot.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not gonna quit. This is like not over. I'm just gonna get there a different way.
Right. And that flexibility is what we need. Like some of us have never seen that. We've only seen like one way, or it has to be A or B, but you need that flexibility to kind
Yeah,
of get through, right? And pivot. Some
yeah.
amazing things happen in that pivot.
I'm curious. So, what would you say to someone like me? So, if you've been watching me for a while, or you know me in my personal life, like I'm what I would consider a jumper, right? Like I have no safety net. I go full force. The second I decide something, it's done, right? Like it's going to happen. I'll tell you, like when I started my business,
Mm-hmm.
I stayed at my 9 to 5 job as long as it took me to get a mortgage on my condo. And then the second I saw it recorded in New York City, I quit.
Come out.
And like that was just, it was like there is no way this is not working out, because that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing when I was moving here to Arizona, like it was only supposed to be for 6 months, but
Mm-hmm.
I literally made the decision sometime in November. I rented out my condo, packed my stuff in a camper van, drove cross country, and was here by New Year's.
Honey. Bless your soul, honey. I can do all of that. But
So
apparently it works for you.
it works for me, but I'm always like, I always have this like worry in the back of my mind if that is like courage or am I on some level running away? But
Uh-huh.
it works out for me, you know? Like it's
Mhm.
just I just feel like I need the fire, right? Like I
Mhm.
need the fire under me to
Mhm.
know that it's either this I make this work
Mhm.
or I'll spectacularly doing it.
Mm. But there's something about you that you have the skill and ability to work with that and like work with that energy and like pull it together and make it work, right?
Yeah.
It would be interesting, like you're saying, like, am I running from things? If sometimes you slow down a little bit to see if there is like some other resistance that like you don't want to feel, that's like, no, I don't want to be uncomfortable and do this, so I'm out, right? Right. And maybe there is something else. But I feel like there's definitely like different types of people because I'm not that risky, honey.
Yeah.
Right? I don't mind jumping, but I have to understand what I'm jumping into. So for me, it's like taking my time to understand like what it is, what I might need, but not taking too long to to do it, right? Or maybe I've got to like do it in a like liken it to swimming. I'm taking like swimming lessons for the last year, and I'm jumping in like 3 feet of water, and I'm scared of 3 feet of water, right? I'm 5'8", and I'm scared of 3 feet of water, right? But I'm gonna jump in, and I'm jumping in because I'm trying to get over that fear and learn how to swim. But it's preparing me to jump into like the deep. So similarly, some people have to take their time with where they are. And kind of prepare themselves for like that bigger leap, and that's okay. And there's some people that's like, I'm just gonna jump right into the deep end and figure it out. So I think it's knowing who you are, and either way, at times slowing down to just pay attention to if there is like other resistance around there that I'm avoiding. I'm avoiding by going way too slow and pulling back, or I'm avoiding by like going way too fast and ignoring
Yeah.
it. But it seems like it still works. So
Yeah. And
that's a good thing.
I very much identify with what you said about like you kind of analyze things first, right? Because yeah, I jump, but you're right. I analyze things first. It's just like a much quicker analysis, let's
Yeah,
say, than, you know, because like I just don't dwell on it, right? Like once
right.
I've made that decision, I'm full force, 100% going. Like,
Hmm.
so I'll give you like a few kind of things. So with my business, like I had already started my business before I quit. So I had like one client and I knew I was going to have a little bit of income and I knew I had savings enough to carry me over until I got more. And then I was just like, oh, the bank is not going to like that. So I'm going to wait till I get this mortgage and then
You
I'm
still
doing
had
it.
a plan, girl. You still had a plan.
Right. Like I had a
Yeah,
plan.
yeah.
Um, the move to Arizona was a little bit different because that was somewhat trauma based.
Mm.
What happened was, oh my God, I'm going to like trauma dump for a second.
Well, we leave space, right, for whatever it is that needs to happen. I think even just without judgment. So it's like if that's what I feel and that's where I'm at in the moment, it is what we mean by slowing down is just kind of noticing that and just honoring that. So
Yeah. So I was with my boyfriend at the time, now husband. We witnessed a murder, and it was very close to my house. We ID'd them to police, like it was a whole big thing. I got blue hair. I my condo is in my name, my business is in my name, and in New York they have to release your name to the defense. And the second I got that letter, I was just like, I'm out. I'm
yeah.
gonna freaking figure it out. Like I can't be here right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That makes sense. Like and safety is first, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So that situation of that makes sense. But then you still have this ability to the skill set that you have to work under though that sort of like intensity and pressure to pull things off. It wasn't like we gonna move and this is not gonna work. We're gonna do this.
yeah,
And that part of you that knows how to work through that definitely sound like it kicked in and activated for you.
yeah.
Super
And,
powerful there.
and and I'm a firm believer in like, you know, like really. facing what terrifies you and understanding it. And like in that moment, I couldn't go face to face, but I did go back, right? Like I have been back and forth. And in another instance, I'll tell you like one other thing. Like, I'll tell you one other thing. The other
Problem
time,
when you talk to a therapist, honey, like all kind of stuff be coming out. Like, what are we talking about? Business and courage?
so I'll tell you one other thing because I feel like it's the way it worked for me in business as well. Well, this is like a story that I tell when I talk to people about like why. So my business is called Financial Sharktress, and if you see, there are sharks behind me.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a scuba diver, and I was deathly afraid of sharks. Now, I was that kid that watched Discovery Channel, National Geographic, learned everything, and was just like, oh my God, they're so amazing. I never want to see one. And then it got to a point where I was just like, okay, I'm scuba diving now. It's been 4 years.
Hey.
I'm going to see a shark at some point, and I don't want to hurt myself. And so at that moment, I booked a shark dive with no cage and went in St. Martin and literally just had 20 sharks around me, and they were like feeding them in front of my face, and I'm just like surrounded. And it was then that I like realized, oh, they don't care about me. They like dead, sickly fish. Like I'm huge compared to that fish that they're trying to go for. Now I'm not talking about like great whites in this case. Like it was like reef sharks, like 9 to 14 footers, but a big shark, you know? And it was that moment and kind of that same feeling that I take into business with me, where it's like, I'm going to just show up and I'm going to put myself in the position to realize that these people are not as scary as I think they are.
Right. The thing that I'm feeling, like it's not as bad as I think, right? The fear may not be as real as I think, right? And I think kind of just going back to like how we approach things, like you're able to put yourself there and kind of go all in with facing that. And on the same token, you know, there may be folks that like it's okay to take your time. You don't have to be the one that goes, she went straight into the water.
Yeah.
All right. I would have went with the
I'm a jumper. It's not for everyone.
Right. So don't feel bad if you're not the jumper. But, you know, I think the idea of facing that fear, because you just need to see that it's not as bad as you think it is, right? But
yeah,
beautiful analogy, because it does show up in business too, where there's so many things and like random things that you kind of get afraid around, right? And even things like money, right? And losing money, having money, like there's so many things that come up around that really kind of limits us, but we've got to learn and see that we're really okay.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest places it shows up for me and a lot of other people I've spoken to is networking. Like actually being in the same other people that you may or may not, like a lot of times you think they know more than you or that they're at a different level.
Oh yeah. And I'm not good enough to kind of be in this space. Like I definitely see that, and I see it too with and things like socials again, like going live, talking about what you do. So I think in the same capacity in real life networking, it is hard to think about, well, how do I talk about what I do? What do I say? And we're often in our head about that. Am I going to say the wrong thing? I don't belong here. And we could spend the whole time thinking, and then we never really engage, and we kind of like, you know, we lose opportunities. So definitely it's good to understand what's happening and how to navigate that so we can show up for ourselves and for the business.
Yeah. So I'll give you like one really great networking tip that I got, which has helped me tremendously and has created opportunities for me. It was to walk into a room and find the person that looks as scared as I feel and then start a conversation with them.
I feel bad for everybody that's listening that's like, oh, that's why she came over to me. Oh my gosh, So that's awesome, right? Because then y'all are together, and that's better. It's always better to double team anything, right? You don't feel like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
Do you have any like nuggets of wisdom that you'd share?
Just as you said that, someone had said like start at one point and like with a drink or something too, which like just gives you something to kind of navigate a little bit where you can be sipping all the drink in between. But pick one point in the room and then try to work your way back around like to that point. So you're still
Mm,
moving, you're talking to people as you go, and like you know that like I'm trying to get to that destination. So I just thought that was helpful. And then
yeah.
the double teaming thing, if you can go with somebody so you don't feel like that awkward, but somebody that's going to encourage you and not just sit and talk to you because, you're trying to meet other people.
Yeah.
In terms of like this fear of showing up and like being visible, because, I always say like you have a story and you have a story that needs to be told. So just do it. Practice, know that you're gonna mess up, but understand that people are not that critical, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes you'll be even surprised that people are supportive of you being your genuine self, of like, oh, like I forgot that, or, oh, I was supposed to do this. Like they'll still encourage you, and that'll feel good sometimes. So it doesn't ever need to be perfect to show up. And the more you show up and try, like the easier it'll get. So whatever that thing is that you're afraid to do, especially when it comes to your business, like just try and let's see what happens. And then
Yeah. I feel like we forget that each person is a whole person in their own head, and so usually they're thinking about their own stuff. Like totally didn't notice that you messed up that word,
right,
or like that your makeup wasn't perfect or whatever.
right.
They don't care.
They're not looking at you that hard. Absolutely. Then we can even remember that, like they're not looking at you that hard. Just I'll do the
Yeah.
thing. And they'll probably relate to you more. And you probably want to work with the person that like can relate to you more, right? That was like, wow, like when you were babbling, like I love that because I babbled too, right? Or when you said that, oh, you dropped the eyelash, like that was me today. Oh, they may connect with you, like when she comes over and it's like, oh, you scared to be here? Yeah, like, I didn't know I
Yeah,
looked that bad. So you know.
exactly. Like let's be a community. Like that's what being in a community means, right? Like it's
Yeah, it's
seeing
okay to
each other for in and not just seeing like the perfect image, right? Because that's not really being supportive. That's not really being a community member.
yeah,
You see your community at every level, you know?
yeah, yeah. And it's I think that's so important too, because sometimes we hold people to this standard that they are this like perfect something, and I think that's really dangerous too, because then it's easy to believe then that I have to keep coming back and be perfect. So I feel like that's another place that we've got to give people a little bit of space too, where like it's okay if you just come and be yourself, and like that's fine. It's fine if you come and like mess up. Like we just love hearing you, right? So really just validating the things that you like about that person and not making them feel like even like they have to keep showing up to this like standard too,
Yeah.
because we kind of like can easily like idolize people, I think, too, right? Instead of kind of like encouraging. Like I think it gets to this wrong place. So
Yeah.
we've got a lot of growing and supporting to do, and learning and unlearning. But I love that we could do it together in spaces like this and could challenge ourselves to think about like, what am I doing and what do I need to do more of? And who are they talking to me?
Yeah. So let's see. If somebody is feeling this and they're like, oh my God, Amanda is talking to me right now, how do they get in contact with you?
Well, honey, you can find me at www. And if you call me by midnight, no. Oh my gosh. So yeah, but my website, you guys can always reach out there, www.amandafludd.com. Also Instagram. I always love a follow. I try to approach that space of like a same educational learning space. So you can always just get something and not just like encouraging, but like things to do and action steps. And because everybody's at different spaces of readiness. Maybe you just need to hear information and do a little bit of that practice on your own and build up that courage muscle to then reach out and say like, hey, I actually need a little more help with this. So I encourage that. Do that on your own, and get yourself ready to really kind of do more work. That's okay. So Instagram at the same thing. And if you happen to be a woman of color and just want to be in an encouraging community, we're on Facebook. If you just put in mindset plus motivation, the group will come up. And you can find us. So I'm around and I love chatting. You can ask me a question. I'll tell you. If you need to practice your ask, like in my DMs, as the kids say, honey.
Yeah, can the audience practice in your DMs?
Oh, come on, let's go. Ask me anything. For the next 24 hours, you can ask me anything you want. Oh my goodness. Absolutely, guys. It's
I
great to
love that. And then I'm gonna make sure to get all your links out there as well. So so if anyone needs to find Amanda, please reach out to her. Or if you know anyone that needs to hear this episode, please make sure to share it with them. Subscribe in all the places. Like, subscribe, follow.
Right? That's the one thing you can do. If nothing else, just click, 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 please. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here, Amanda. I really, really appreciate it. All right. Have an amazing night, everyone. You know how to reach me. Galit Speaks on all the platforms. Thank you, Amanda, for being here. Thank you for giving all of your wisdom and like just holding space for me to babble.
That's why we need community. Like, where else can we do this? Like, come on.
Exactly. All right. And have a good night, everyone. And I will see you next week for another episode.